Hello
Okay.
and hello and welcome to Family Partners of Morris and Sussex Counties weekly Lunch and Learn program. My name is Holly Dinnany and I will be facilitating today's program. And I want to welcome everybody here. I want to tell you it's okay if you leave your camera off. We know you might be nibbling at your desk, but we also love to see smiling faces. So feel free to turn that camera on if you're brave and want to spread some sunshine. We like that too. Um, we will be recording today's program, so we will be sharing it with you following this presentation. And I also would like to invite you to check out our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and put in Family Partners of Morris and Sussex County, and you will find the recording of today's presentation along with over 45 other presentations that we've given that have invited folks who are specialists dealing with youth with challenges, organizations that serve them, and resources that are available to parents and providers in our community. So with no further ado, today's topic has always been an important topic. School avoidance, school resistance is a thing. It's not just a kid who's being a pain in the neck. There are reasons behind the behaviors that we see that we, as parents, probably don't always know how to respond to or how to handle. And I'm very glad that today's guest is Susan Gibbs, who's a licensed professional counselor, and she also does a lot of work for Rutgers. Is it Pathway to Success or Path to Success, Susan?
I think it's pathways.
I think Pathways too. I think I had a typo in my promo, so my apologies. But my point is, you are someone as a counselor, you have a lot of skills and background in how to help children with behaviors. But I'm finding that what we also have to do is help us understand perhaps why the behaviors are what they are so that we can respond in a way that helps, not exacerbates whatever the resistance might be. So I'm happy to have you with us today. And Susan, we call this lunch with an expert. So we kind of want it to be casual and informal and welcoming. So tell us a little bit about you. How long have you been doing what you're doing?
Sure. So how long have I been a counselor for? We'll say that I've been a licensed counselor since 2012. I currently have my own private practice. So I've had my private practice. November will be my 6th anniversary. So I'm excited about that. And what I came into the field in community mental health. So I was in my master's program. I came in as community mental health. I came in as like line staff, case management, adult case management actually. And then I moved from adult case management into adult residential, moved from adult residential, did my internship with IIC services. So I was an IIC therapist probably for about 8 to 10 years while I was finishing my hours and then just getting some more experience, things like that. I supervised Burlington County Mobile Response or program coordinator for Burlington County Mobile Response for 3 years as well, and a licensed certified mental health screener. So I've been in residential, I've been, in the homes, I've been in case management. I've also worked, I don't know why I forget about this, for 4 years actually in an alternative high school where our goals were to help with academic achievement, help with improve school attendance, and also just to get the kids in the building. Like we were very, very, we had to use a lot of I don't want to say bribes. We had to, encourage them, very, very
How
strongly
about
encourage and
creative,
be
Susan? Were you
creative.
creative in your
Yes.
motivation?
We're very creative in our motivations to get kids in the building, in the seats, in the classrooms. So yeah, so that's
But you're a good expert to have lunch with. And I'm just gonna, before I turn it over to you, I'm just gonna to tell you that we were chatting before you arrived. And of course, school refusal is important, but there's also the other side of that, which is like how working parents cope with school refusal. So I'm gonna lay that on your plate along with everything else that you're addressing today. And we want to hear what you have to say.
Sure, sure. I'm excited. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I come from a crisis background. So if I'm a little bit frazzled, it's because I was probably just doing something. So I'm going to try to relax into this. But thank you again for having me. I'm so happy to talk about this topic. I was able to learn a lot through wraparound services, and again through working in the alternative high school. So I like to start. I'm gonna go ahead and try to put up my slides, and we'll see. I usually only can share a portion, so you'll see like my whole screen. Forgive me, I don't think I have anything embarrassing on that right now. And then and then I'll portion it out to what is better. Okay. Yep, here we go. Can we see it?
We can. We can see full
Beautiful.
screen, actually. Yep.
Okay. All right, great. So I just want you guys to see the slides here. So again, this is school resistance. I usually start my first slide just with like, do we have any questions, any burning questions, that we want to ask? So Holly, heard you say, parents want to know what they're supposed to do when their child refuses school. So that's something that I'll definitely try to touch on. Briefly, there's just this could be a full day topic. So yeah, so let me know if we have any
Like
other
I said, that
questions.
especially with balancing it with work. I mean, I think even with folks working from home, like the whole thing, I
Oh
think
yeah,
that's probably a lot to cover. So fire away.
it is. So that's anybody else. I didn't see anything else in the chat there. So
Nope,
I'll
that
move
was
on to
it.
my next. So we're strengths based, right? So we do a lot of nurtured heart language and a lot of strengths based, and like not just looking at the things that the children are doing wrong, but what are the children doing correctly, right? So I always feel like for one really, really big attention seeking, like resource consuming behavior that children have, there are also 10, 15, even 20 things that that the students are doing correctly. And so when I work with families, I really try to focus heavily on that. So even here in the presentation, I'll mention, first the reasons that children do attend school before we get into the 10,000 reasons that children don't go to school. So as an umbrella, the reasons that children do go to school is because they like the socialization aspect. So, and that's also a reason that they don't go to school. But for the majority of students that are attending school, it's because they have connections to somebody at school, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a coach, whether it's one friend. It doesn't have to be a whole big group of friends. If they have one really close friend that they have at the school that they connect to, that might be enough reason for them to go to school. Maybe they have 2 or 3 friends. Maybe they do have a group. Maybe that there's a club there, but there is a socialization reason for students attending school. Some students, the mastery and academic achievement would be a reason that they would go to school. They feel good about themselves. Maybe certain things are out of control at home, but they're going to go to school because they're doing well, and that's something they can feel as though they can control in terms of studying really hard for a test, or being able to complete their homework assignments on time, and having like something graded in their hand that they can look at and say, look, somebody's noticing the work that I'm putting in. So they might be academic achievers. They might have achievement in sports. They might, again, they're going to school if they feel some kind of mastery in something. If it's not academics, if it's not social, maybe it's in sports. And then some of our students, this is from a training that I did before, somebody had mentioned, this is a really good point, is that some students have such poor environments at home, or in such negative environments at home, that going to school actually is preferable to staying in the house. So those are reasons, whatever we can grasp onto when we're working with a student who's starting to refuse school or starting to show school resistant behaviors. We do want to focus on why were they going to school. Any questions in that? Anything that you want to add that I might not have covered? It was really brief.
Well, another question came into the chat, Susan, is that someone has a son who's turning 18 before senior year and has experienced school refusal challenges in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So is it a good idea to consider guardianship in order to keep him from quitting school before he graduates?
Oh, that's a question I haven't ever been asked. So, but I think that yes, like if there's not one of these reasons that's kind of like a hook to get the child in school, and we're fearful that it could happen, that they would just move from like skipping class or having a stomach ache in the morning, or move to like missing full days and then become truant after 2 weeks, then yes, guardianship would be something that is an avenue. I just don't know the length of time that takes. But I think that's an excellent question. I think it's a very proactive question. And again, like, wow, I've never been asked that before.
But that's something to, I mean, I'm hearing you say that's something to explore because of the dynamics. And someone else asked a question about what's the role of the school as far as responsibility in helping with school refusal. If they're being told that the student's a model student and they're not understanding why they don't want to come in and the problem must be at home, does the school have any responsibility to help you with that?
The school would have responsibility. A lot of it depends on the age. So elementary school, I find that they have, the population just isn't as large. So we might have an elementary school that has 350 to 500, maybe 600 students. And so they don't have as many staff as a high school, but their resources are going to be, they tend to be much more accommodating. They tend to be much more helpful, I have found, and much more like working with the parents, right? Because the children aren't able to advocate for themselves as much. Middle school gets kind of hectic because the kids are starting to display behavior problems that maybe they were displaying in fourth and fifth grade, but didn't really come to a head until they're in this bigger environment where there's like 1,100, 1,200, 1,500 students in a junior high or a middle school. And so those, there'll be less resources to, for the school, and parents will want to start working with the child study team and like, or INR. Different schools call it different things. So like recognizing early the kids that might be at risk for school refusal, or the kids that are at risk in general for for not like performing the way that the rest of the level is. And so I think that the school is their hands are forced when we start to engage with 504 and IEP plans.
Right. So that honestly, if this is the parent that asked this has the child that's older. So I'm hearing you say being proactive is great, but also
Mhm.
maybe reaching out to the team, to the school to see if there is, for instance, a child study team or whoever it might be that maybe they should work proactively with. Because I hope, and this is a big hope, that we're not pointing fingers at whose responsibility it is, but hopefully more looking at how parent and school can work together to help
As
the
a
student
team,
as
right?
as a team.
Right. So we want there to be, if it's going to be an IEP, there's going to be a special education teacher involved. And so sometimes the teachers and the parents will form the team, and then the teacher then inside the school can help to advocate. Again, even if there's a 504, if we can get one or two teachers, one teacher especially, or a guidance counselor that understands, the trajectory of like when the behavior started and how things started to slide, and understands and can advocate with the school, then they tend, like, having an advocate that's not on child study team, but that's not the parent, will always be helpful in the school for the child. I think that also, so yes, but being proactive, so if parents are afraid that it's going to happen, go ahead and request the 504 or request the IEP. 504s are going to be easier to get approved at a junior and senior high school level. Like IEPs are really hard to get approved at that point. So the 504 plan would be really great if you have a therapist on board or clinicians that have worked with them ahead of time. Like I often will write letters saying, the child has X, Y, or Z disorder if the parents want me to do that, but I'll like write in some kinds of things that the child can do in order to help reduce their anxiety in school and help get them in the building if they know that they have a safety plan or a crisis plan, or almost like an escape plan. So if they don't feel obligated to stay in the seat for the full 47 or 52 minutes for every single period, at junior and senior year, but know that they can go to the guidance counselor, know that they can have extra bathroom breaks, know that they can go to the bathroom and splash cold water in their face, or, go in this bathroom stall and do some tapping, that nobody's going to notice, to help self-regulate and calm themselves down, or know that, people are understanding, like not everybody, but that quietly, like that like one or two of the teachers, that the 504, the guidance counselors and the CST understand that the child has something going on, that there is a plan in place, that they're getting help outside of school. Schools always like to hear that somebody is engaging in treatment outside of the building. And again, because it's just that team approach, like the child, it's a symptom of something going on inside of them, or a symptom of the environment when they're refusing school or when they're resisting school. And so like putting the blame on the child and just making the child have full ownership doesn't ever, like, it doesn't have good outcomes, right? So when we take the team approach, um, parents, child study team, guidance, a teacher, even a bus driver, like those, or a friend, like when we have like a team approach, yes, it uses a lot of resources, but the child, like, because they want to be in school. It doesn't matter to me if they're 5 or they're 11 or they're, 18. They actually do want to be in schools. We as adults strive on structure and routine, right? And knowing what's expected of us. Even as adults, we don't like to disappoint others. We don't really like to like other people to, we don't like to think that other people are disappointed in us. So children, like, really in their heart of hearts want to be in school because that's what's expected, and because like they're getting something out of it, an education and being set up for the future. When they start to refuse school, it's just because the balance is off, right? So they start to feel as though what the benefit of what they're getting out of it, and the negative feelings associated with it, the negative feelings become higher and the benefit becomes lower. And so that's when we start to see the school refusal piece or the school resistance piece. So these are great questions. Great questions. I like when it's a conversation.
Well, I did, and I was gonna say, because we're getting the chat is blowing up a little bit, because even like, how do you avoid truancy court? Like, doesn't that kick things into a whole other level or a whole other realm if you've got a
It
kid who's resisting?
it does, and I feel like, and I I feel like the school truancy thing pops in when the school and the parents aren't necessarily having great communication, right? So that they're just looking at it as the behavior, and the child's not doing this and the child's not doing that and the parents not doing this and the parents aren't doing that. When you talk about that blame game, Holly, like when there's not a lot of communication, and that's when the truancy courts, I feel like, get involved, because the school feels like they just don't know what else they can do. They just don't know what else, but making school refusal and school resistance and anxiety, or separation anxiety, like making that a legal issue, like that's really tough, right? Like that's really like, it wouldn't be the way that I go. Guardianship, I think, is separate issue. For because guardianship is very proactive. Like I want to do what I can to help set my student up, and set my student up for like this positive school year, setting them up for their future. That's different than, like I said, like legally, like getting like truancy involved and involving fines and all these kinds of things. So so helping figure out, like, my slides have a lot to do with figuring out where the student's coming from, but we also want to take the time to find out where the parents are coming from. There may be a distrust of the education system, right? And that could be systemic. It could be because they didn't have good experiences in school. It could be because like they've tried to reach out to the school and haven't had positive feedback from the school about that. So there may be some distrust, and so they don't want to tell the school what's going on with the child, or all the treatment that they have the child in, or that the child started medication. They just might not want to tell the school because they're not sure what the school is going to do with that information. And so those would be that would be an important thing to explore with the parents too. Like, have you told the school? What is there a reason that you have or have not told the school? How can I help with that as providers? To kind of bridge that. And so that would be my answer. I hope I don't,
Which I
was
know,
there
I think
any?
that's great. And you know what, Susan, that's why it's so important to have these conversations, because like you said, the parents may have their own bad experiences. And then I will venture to say that there are some teachers who just don't get it because they don't understand the
Mhm.
psychology and the trauma that might be a cause for what's going on. So I'm gonna, if I can, just rephrase what I'm hearing you say is, make sure you're reaching out to the school. And if you get someone who's not maybe open to or receptive, keep looking for someone who is, because I really, in my heart of hearts, think there's always someone there who's willing to team up with you to support a student, right? I really think that, I don't like when we get into the whose responsibility. It's more about who's going to be a good partner to support
Sh-
the youth.
Sure. And I think, when it's a team approach, we get all the information that we need. Exactly like you're saying, Holly, that was a really, really good summarization. Is that you stay connected with the school somehow. A lot of times, the parents will be like, well, I don't know who to contact, or, like, I reached out to them, they never emailed me back. Well, maybe it was a bad day, maybe they weren't there. That's okay to call. Like, you didn't get an email, okay, then it's okay to call, right? And if the parent's like, well, I hate talking on the phone. Well, as a provider, as a care manager, even as a therapist, sometimes if I was at the home during school hours, or even if I wasn't, I would help the parent. I would coach the parent and say like, leave a message. And they're like, well, I don't know what to say. Well, we'll script it out. And then, but communication with the school and what's going on and what you're trying is very important. It's, and especially important if we want to avoid truancy court. Because again, I think it's just penalizing the parents for, a symptom of a larger issue that the child is having, and that like a penalty and a fine is not going to address the underlying issue and the underlying symptoms that's leading to the school refusal, in my opinion. So I think, like I said, like the emails, leaving phone calls, if the parent doesn't know, talking to the student and saying, which teacher do you like the best? Right? Which teacher do you talk to? Like, do you feel comfortable talking to? Like, there's usually, like as a kid in school, like I was pretty shy, but there were one or two teachers that I felt like were really open, that if I had a problem, this is who I would go to. You know what I mean? Or like I felt comfortable like joking with that teacher once in a while. And so if you can just find out like who are you comfortable joking around with, or who has a really good sense of humor, who's really flexible, asking your student those kinds of questions, you're going to find out the teacher that you can reach out to that will probably like extend themselves to try to help advocate in the building.
I just want Susan Gibbs, I had a parent say to me that there was a child who got caught cheating on a test, and the teacher called home, and the parents fortunately were forthcoming that there were some things going on at home and there were some stresses. And fast forward a couple months, that teacher was the teacher the student asked to write their recommendation for college letter, because the teacher appreciated that this kid was dealing with some stuff, made a mistake, but recovered. But I don't think that story would have had a happy ending if it weren't for the cooperation and honestly, the parents went out on a limb and said, listen, here's what's happening at home. And this is not how we roll, and this is not how he rolls. But, it's again, the communication, if you find the right teacher, right? The right administrator can really, really be a big plus.
Sure. The right teacher, the right administrator, because, that there's something about the teacher that will like that teacher recognize like, hey, this is not typical. So like went out, like stepped out and did something really uncomfortable. The teacher did something really uncomfortable. Like, who wants to call a parent and be like, oh, your child was caught cheating in my class, because some parents will say like, oh, not my kid, blah, 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 blah. Are you sure it wasn't Johnny? Some kind of thing. So that, the teacher has to make themselves vulnerable, and brave and courageous in making those calls. And then the parents, put themselves again in a vulnerable position. But, if any of us follow Brene Brown, and if you don't, you can look her up after here, there's no courage without vulnerability, and there's no vulnerability without courage, right? So for the parents to like, yes, like let that guard down and be vulnerable and say, hey, this is what's going on, how can we help here? Or what can we do? Like, so the parents being receptive and listening, and then the teacher, like, and then the connection was being able to be made there, because like I said, children actually do want to go to school. Like that child getting caught, no, it doesn't feel comfortable getting caught, no, it doesn't feel comfortable getting in trouble, but infinitely better for it to be caught early, for something to be said the first time, and then and to correct it, or to address the issue, or to find out how we can help support the student and the family early on, before things get so big, because that student really respects that teacher for having called him out on something, even if he may never admit it. You know what I mean? There's something about that accountability, the structure, the protectiveness, like, and the safety that he felt, that he knew he wasn't going to get, or he or she wasn't going to get away with it. Right. There is something to be said about like predictability, and like knowing that like, okay, that teacher's not going to put up with my crap. Great. Now that's a safe person. Right? Yeah, now that's a safe person. So was there another question in the chat? Were you getting some positive comments?
Nope, I think we're good. I just put Brene Brown's name in the chat. If someone hasn't looked into her, look into her. Actually, certainly children are more vulnerable now after the pandemic. So I'm going to let you go on. We'll pick your brain later, Susan. Go on.
Okay. All right. Great. So, student reasons that children do attend school. I love these questions about how do we be proactive in the beginning. We talked about reasons. Where did my slide go? Anyway, reasons that children will tend to not go to school. Number one, avoidance of negative affect. I feel really bad. My stomach hurts. I don't want to get on the bus, like these kinds of things. So, and there's another slide about it later, but avoidance of negative affect is the number one reason they don't like feeling bad. That's why they will not go to school. Or if they don't like feeling bad in one class, all of a sudden they go to the art teacher that day instead, or because they've made a connection to the art teacher, or they go to somebody else's lunch because they don't want to go to that class, or they go down to guidance, or somehow like every single day they have a doctor's appointment that day and they need to leave. So avoidance of negative affect is number one. The number two reason for school refusal, school resistant behaviors, is going to be avoidance or escape from social or evaluative situations. And so what that means, again, I have a slide for that. Let's go ahead up to that. So students feeling like, what if I don't know anyone? Like for the little guys, what if I don't know anyone? What if the teacher calls on me and I don't know the answer? Or what if the teacher calls on me and I give the wrong answer and now everybody's going to laugh? And so that's a social situation. That's an evaluative situation where we can get feedback, where we feel like we're a failure, or we feel like we didn't know, or, like little kids, or even high school. I remember in high school of being like, I was in AP classes in high school, but I was still like, if I gave the wrong answer, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. What am I like? I felt like an imposter, right? Like I don't belong here. So that's like a really like those negative feelings sometimes can become so big, left unchecked or untreated, that it will be a reason that students don't go to class and then don't go to school and then don't go to school for 2 or 3 weeks. Who will I sit with at lunch? And so, I like to talk to adults about like how many times have you gone out to eat by yourself and sat at a table by yourself in a restaurant, or gone to a movie by yourself, right? Like there's this safety in numbers. We want to know that we have a connection with somebody, that we belong or accepted by somebody. So if you're a freshman walking into a cafeteria that holds 700 students, and you haven't made a friend yet, who are you going to sit with? And if you're sitting by yourself, even if they're not looking at you, in our heads, we're thinking everybody's looking at me and they're thinking I'm a really big loser. So maybe one of the examples of something that somebody is looking at, right? So lunchtime is a really, really, really difficult time and a really big connection for school refusals. And something that is on this slide here is here, the buses. This will be also a really big reason that children might refuse to go to school first thing in the morning. So there is an entire culture I'm finding out of what's going on these buses that will really, there's a lot of bullying, it's unchecked bullying, there's a lot of teasing, there's a lot of like moving seats, and the bus drivers are helpless because they're driving the bus. They're on a very tight schedule. They have to get like a certain number of kids picked up, dropped off, go do their next run. So the bus drivers will have the same run, but they'll have it starting at high school, then middle school, and if there's like an upper elementary, the lower elementary, like the bus drivers are under a lot of pressure to get the kids there and get the kids there safely. So if certain kids feel like they're being bullied on the bus, or certain kids feel like they don't have anybody to sit with or talk to on the bus, they might just not want to get on the bus. And so they're hearing from so the parents are hearing, I don't want to go to school, when really it might have to do with the bus. So, right. So who am I going to sit with on the bus? Who am I going to sit with at lunch? To go back to more of the evaluative situations, like what if there's, a test or a quiz or a presentation? What if the teacher asked me to read aloud? When we're in elementary school, I remember wanting to be the child, like, I want to use the chalk and like run up and like write something on the chalkboard. Or, when the whiteboards became more popular, like going up to like wanting to write something on the whiteboard. Well, as excited as I was to do something like that, even if I didn't want to raise my hand, there were a lot of students who don't want anything to do with writing at the front of the board. It's too much pressure. What if it's wrong? What if people make fun of my handwriting? What if I can't write straight? What if I spell something wrong? Reading aloud, writing aloud, or writing up on the board, something like that. Even having to ask a question. I don't want to ask a question because what if somebody thinks I'm stupid? And telling students, like if you have the question, chances are somebody else has the question. Doesn't get internalized as easy as what if I ask a question, everybody laughs at me, so not understanding something over time and not asking questions and falling farther and farther behind. Again, we know that will lead to school refusal, some school resistance. Again, for our littles, how do I talk with somebody? I'm sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place here, but the littles, the older kids, I think it's good to touch on like different developmental ages and how it affects school refusal affects them. But how do I talk with somebody new? And that could be for any grade, junior high and high school for sure. What if I get lost? I'm late to class. Everybody's going to look at me. The bell's going to ring. The teacher's going to say something. Everybody's going to laugh. What if I get lost and I can't find my way? It's very frightening. Or again, being tied to being late or coming into school late, having a doctor's appointment. I would have kids tell me that they weren't going to go to school at all if they had to go in late. If they had to leave early, it was fine. But if they had to go in late, they just weren't going to go in at all that day. And I was like, I don't understand. Right. And like, I didn't have to say, well, that's stupid or that doesn't make any sense. Like, as it's not my call to judge that. It's not my call to even, I just have to let them know, like, I hear what you're saying. Can you explain it to me as a clinician, as a provider? We can have judgment in our head, but what's going to come out of my mouth is, could you explain that a little bit more about that to me? So any questions so far?
I think
What
we're
we
good. You're
do.
covering a lot of info. I like it.
Okay, great. So I just want to go back for a second to the avoidance of the negative affect, just because, like I said, it's like probably the number one reason why students are not going to be going to school, and probably the things that the parents, it's going to resonate with parents the most, right? And providers too. And when I cover this, it's usually helpful because, like, when I was talking to people up North Jersey, they would say like, oh, we got called, mobile response, we got called in because the kid's not coming to school, or because, or the kid's close to having to go to truancy court or something like that. And so identifying these kinds of things, maybe some of you will shake your head and you understand, and some of you will be writing down, because these are things that like nobody has explained to you as the providers about why the child is not going to school. So, and I also, before we even get into the avoidance and negative affect, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump back even further a little bit here, is what is school refusal, right? So what does school refusal look like? So school refusal or school resistance may start with, like I said before, like going to the nurse, going to guidance, wanting to go into school late to avoid first period, wanting to like end early because they want to avoid French, because they don't want to have to speak French out loud. It could be that they're, like they don't want to go to lunch because they don't have the money to buy lunch, because nobody packed them anything that day, because somebody hadn't gone grocery shopping. It could be any number of reasons that they avoid lunch, and like they want to find someplace else to go during the lunch period, or just avoid school completely. So it could just be part of the day. So it's important to recognize that school refusal doesn't begin when they've started like skipping full days of school. It can start as early as missing part of class, missing a whole class, missing 2 or 3 parts of class, missing a half day. So school refusal, like by the time they get to a full day, there's been a lot of lead up, that we want to help the parents and help the school as providers, that we want to help them recognize that there's something going on, because they've got 20 tardies, no full days missing, but 20 tardies, that there's something going on there, right? So that school refusal. And then like I would imagine that's very, like, once a child has refused a full day, if we can get, when their school refusal is showing, I always said, like in the high school and in an alternative school, if we can get the child in for part of the day, it's a win, right? The second we've let them stay home for the first day, that's why I like that question about being proactive. The second we've let them stay home for one day, we've lost a lot of ground, right? Like we haven't lost, the battle's not over, but we've lost a lot of ground, and we need to and right there at the first day, if the child does refuse, when the child refuses and the parent has to go to school and says, I just don't have time to deal with this because I can't lose my job, right? And the child, and we've done everything that we can in the morning that I'll go over that we can try, but we go to work and the child stays home. And now the parents are upset because like, okay, now my child got to stay home all day. And what am I going to do? What am I going to take away from them? Well, that's not necessarily what it's about, what we're going to take away from them. When you come home from work that day, it's about that reconnecting, right? Reconnecting about something that has nothing to do with school, just having a conversation. And Holly, I'll forward you these. I have a list of dinner questions, and maybe some other people got them if they did the drop-in when I first did the drop-in about this a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes we're like on the spot socially, like, I don't know what to talk to my kid about. They don't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to them. I'm so angry. That's fine. We're going to break out this thing called dinner questions. And you just have to ask 1 or 2 of the questions on there, because again, they have nothing to do with school. It's about you and your child trying to relate to each other and having some kind of connection or having some kind of smile together, some kind of breakthrough together that had nothing to do with school. And then we leave when things feel good at that conversation, we leave. We don't then break out into, okay, so now let's talk about school. We don't have a connection with somebody and then automatically jump on that school topic because it seems like manipulation. I was just going to butter you up so that now I can tear you down again. We leave the conversation at a good spot and saying like, okay, so we've connected, so good talk. And, so you can go do what you want to do for now. Like, I'm going to go make dinner, or, can you help your brother with his homework or whatever it's going to be, but it has nothing to do with like, well, I don't know, homework, I guess is another reminder, but like, go take out the trash or whatever it is. And like, oh, wow, thanks. I only had to ask you one time. That's super. Like, I just like, the kitchen was starting to smell. So thank you so much for doing that, So, and that's that nurtured heart language, recognizing, acknowledging, you stayed with me for 5 minutes. It could have been a really hectic conversation, but I so appreciate you giving me 5 minutes out of your day. Are we internally angry and agitated and like, and worried that all these negative feelings are going to come up again when we have to talk about school again later in the night or the next day? Yes, we are. But in that moment, if your child sat with you for 5 minutes or looked at you for 5 minutes or was in a room with you, not looking at you, in a room with you, answering your questions for 5 minutes, I appreciate the time that you gave me. It's very respectful. I love that we had 5 minutes together. Like I wasn't, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I butt in and ask a question?
Yeah.
It's just,
yes,
it's too long to type. So my fear, I hear what you're saying and it sounds wonderful, but my fear, why I would be afraid to do that is because if my child refused school and then, I was searching for 5 minutes to connect with him, and we had a nice, silly 2-question conversation, and I left the room and he was smiling. Does he internalize, well, I guess it must have been okay because she's not mad and she didn't give me the lecture about not going to school? Like, are we sending the wrong message?
So, and that's a great question, Teresa, like, because I get that question so many times when I'm coaching and training parents on nurtured heart too. Like, it's a very valid question. And I think that those kinds of questions come from, our own upbringing. Like, my parents were like, listen, what I say goes. And if I ever asked a question, it was don't talk back. You know what I mean? So it was, and there was like, there's no getting away with bad behavior. Like, if I said shut up and around my house, my parents are like, you don't talk to me that way. And it was like shouting, right? So this feels very odd, right? To have like a 5-minute pleasant conversation after an entire day of refusing school for what we think is no good reason. And maybe even in the grand big picture scheme of things, it's not a good reason to not go to school. But if we're not talking about that behavior right in that minute and we've made a connection with our child, they're saying, my mom still loves me, my dad still loves me, I'm still connected to this family, I still belong to this family, regardless of what I do. They're not taking it as like, oh, I can do this every single day, or I don't have to go to school. See, I'm not going to get in trouble. See, because that conversation is going to come later as we are preparing for school, like preparing for bedtime. The conversation is going to come as we're preparing for bedtime. So this might not, so we'll say something like, so this might not be that like a pleasant conversation for us to have, but we had a really nice time after school. We had a nice dinner together. Sometimes we have dinner together, sometimes we don't, and so we want to, it's okay to call attention to the negative behavior, right? And to our own feelings about it. It helps model that those feelings. So like, I was really like, I don't know if you were nervous after school, or I don't know if you were waiting for us to like have a big fight after school, but I really didn't want to have a big fight after school. I was really nervous that you were going to blow up on me. I'm sure you were nervous that I was going to blow up on you. And it's okay to identify that and state the obvious, right? And say, and I'd really like to have like just a really brief conversation now about school again. If it starts to get heated, we're going to leave the conversation, but I am going to come back to it, right? And the important thing for the parents is the follow through, right? Because the kids aren't going to come back. Like, they might, but typically speaking, like if it's about something that they don't want to talk about, they're not going to come back. So it'll be on the parents to say like, okay, I'll let you calm down. And really, I do want to have a conversation about this, like attending school kind of thing. So what can we do to help you get to school tomorrow? it's not acceptable behavior to like miss an entire day. So, but I want to understand what you were thinking about this morning. So, and we talk about the situation and we talk about what led to not going to school, when things are calm, when they can be logical, when they can be reasonable, when they're rested, when they're well fed, and we try to address some of it then. And we're not going to address all of the behaviors that like we're especially, like I said, if it's gotten to a full day, right? If it's gotten to a full day, chances are there's going to be a battle the next morning and the child's going to think that they're going to win, not because you were kind when they got home. Now they're going to think that they can stay home because they've been getting away with slowly sort of not going to school for weeks by skipping classes. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Susan, one thing I want to jump on, you were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about nurtured heart. You can hear me, yes? I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that kids are less likely to learn, to grow, to confide in us if there's not a positive connection. So sometimes when they do something that disappoints us, it's very hard for us to keep in check that need to have a positive connection. Like you said, that's all nurtured heart, right? That's all what that's about. But I mean, I think it's really hard for us as parents because A, it doesn't agree with how we were raised. And B,
Yes.
I think we're also concerned about what their behavior says as a reflection of us as parents. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be. And it's a place that all of us are in at one time or another. When
Oh,
somebody looks at you, especially when your
100%.
mother goes, well, what did you do? Did you ground him? Did you take his phone? Did you this? Did you that? I mean, it's really, we almost have to relearn how to respond to our children to understand what's happening. Seek first to understand, right? Instead of discipline.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So
Complicated.
yeah, and no, it does get really complicated. And, because yes, the school wants to know what you're doing. Other moms might be chiming in. Oh, so-and-so said that, your son or daughter wasn't in school today. Where were they? And like, so-and-so said that they got to skip school for the whole day and they didn't get in trouble, because all the kids are on Snapchat or social media or Insta or something like that, like, and they're talking to each other and they're saying like, oh, I got away with it. So the really big part is understanding, right? Like, so understanding early on why they're missing parts of the day, understanding early on, like, okay, we missed a whole day today. That's not going to happen tomorrow. So is that still nurtured heart? Sure. It's one of the stands, right? Absolute no, like you're not going to miss school again. Right. Or absolute yes. Like there is going to be consequence, like, is it you like taking away their phone right in that minute? Well, maybe sometime on the weekend, mom, dad, caregivers, whoever's, primary caregivers and rule makers in the house, sitting down with the child. And again, this is not anything like our parents ever did with us. Like, I was never allowed to do this, but sitting down with the child saying like, listen, like this happened, like you missed school. And, we tried to talk about earlier and it kept like exploding and it wasn't a good time to like try to resolve the issue. So now it's the weekend, we're calm, we're gonna hash this out now, right? Like, you can get mad, you're gonna come back to the table, and that's great. And we want to always be with nurtured heart, acknowledging they came back to the table, they came back and had a conversation with me. I like that you respect my authority as your parent, right? Like, it really means a lot to me that you care enough what I'm going to say right now to be here, even if they're rolling their eyes. We don't attend to the rolling the eyes, right? Like, we just don't feed that negative energy, and it's so hard to overcome, right? Like, I feel like I've just been really fortunate because I was introduced to Nurtured Heart in 2006. So like, my kids just grew up with it. Like, my kid, like I've nurtured heart my kids since they were like 14 months. And I was like, I would take their diaper off and they're walking. And I'm like, here, go put your diaper in the trash. Like, I don't think I could do that. Like, if I raise my kids the way that my parents raised me, right? Like, I just don't think it would be like, I told you to do this, how come you didn't do it? And, like, and it would be like a big argument that way. So when we talk to our children and say like, like, okay, it's absolute yes, you have to go to school, or absolutely no, you can't refuse to go to school again. We need you to go to school. You need to go to school. I want to hear and understand the reasons you don't want to go to school, right? So we have conversations about that. So, but there are going to be consequences if you don't go to school. Like, okay, you missed a quiz, or okay, you didn't get attendance points that day or something like that. And those are the school consequences. Well, there are consequences with mom and dad too. And so we need to talk about, if you continue to make choices right? And so we understand, we're phrasing it as like, the child is making a choice, like mom and dad want you to go to school, and that's what the expectation is. But if you're going to choose to not go to school, then you're going to choose for the consequence that goes along with not going to school, right? And so we talk about what the consequences are going to be with the child so that they understand, so they understand like, okay, so if I skip a class, then I lose my phone for however long they lose their phone for, what the parents decide. If I choose to not go to school, for an entire day, do I lose my phone for a whole week? Well, I mean, again, that's up to the parents. And as a clinician, like I've never told the parents like exactly, I've given them like guidance and I give them like nurtured heart and recommendations. Like I'm of the opinion of daily renewable rewards. I don't really think punishing or grounding anybody for a week works very well these days, except for egregious things. But coming to an understanding of like, or is it going to be taking the phone because they don't like, they're like, some kids, like I would go into homes where like parents took away the sheets, they took away the door, they took away all the toys in the room. They would take away everything, and they would take away everything from the child. And the parents would say like, this kid doesn't care about anything. They don't go to school. They don't listen to me. They don't care about anything because look, I've taken everything away. Right. And the child is like, well, they're going to take it. Like, I'm going to earn it back and they're going to take it away again. So why do I even try? Why do I even bother? Like, why am I even going to bother to try? Right? Because it's not about the things. And that's what I like about Nurtured Heart, right? It's about that connection, maintaining the relationship, maintaining that I'm hearing what you're saying. We don't have to agree. I'm hearing what you're saying. And, while I can understand your point, this is still what's going to happen. And if that doesn't happen, then these are going to be the consequences. And sometimes like I'll tell my kids, okay, like you lied to mommy. We've talked about this before. I don't like it when you lie to mommy because it means I can't trust you. It's not about the lie. Kids are going to lie. It hurts mommy when I can't trust you. Right. So we get it down to like, okay, you lied. So what typically happens? Well, mommy takes my phone. Okay, well, my kids don't have a phone. So mommy doesn't let me have the Kindle or something like that. Okay, so you can't have the Kindle, or do you just like, so I'll give them a choice. Like you were supposed to go to your friend's house today. So you can either not go to your friend's house or you can lose your Kindle. Which one would you want? Well, they're going to pick the device then, which is good because I don't want them to have the device anyway. And I take them to their friend's house, and somebody might say like, oh, well, you just rewarded them for bad behavior. I gave them a choice about the consequences because they lied to me. I'm not going to punish my kid and tell them that they can't stay home because they told me a little white lie, right? Like I'm going to give them a choice on what their punishment is. So because they're only going to be at their friend's house for an hour or two, then they're going to come home and they're going to want their device, and I'm going to have to remind them that they chose to not have their device for that day. So there is a consequence.
Susan, what do you do if a child has already shut down due to anxiety or depression and they really don't have consequences don't have any meaning to them?
So work on healing between the caregiver and the child. Right. So because the child, I mean, if the child feels like that the parent is not reliable, or is just going to take away all their stuff, or is just out to be punitive and punish them and discipline them all the time, and the parent thinks that the child doesn't care about their authority whatsoever, as a therapist, like I'm going to want to try to like build the connection with them again. So like as a clinician or an IIC therapist, a lot of us are said, or, we get out to the home and the parents are like, well, it's not me, it's him. He's the one who's not going to school. So just work with him. It's like, okay, I'll do that for a few sessions so that I can get to know the child and so that we can like build a relationship. But then by the third session, I would like to have you in here for session, mom or dad, for 5 or 10 minutes. Right. It usually goes longer. I just need to get my foot in the door to get the 5 or 10 minutes, so talk to the parents about like, so what's going on without the child present, and then bring the child back in. And now like, okay, so we can talk about what's been going on, but you guys have been living it. So let's just have like 5 or 10 minutes where we do something that has nothing to do with why I'm here. And we start the relationship building. And while they're doing something like playing Uno, or while they're doing something like answering dinner questions, or while they're doing something like being in the room together, just being in the room together, I'm going to say like, I'll say something like, wow, so when's the last time you guys like all sat in the same room together? And it's a valid question. And parents were like, I can't even tell you. Or the kid's like, I don't want to be with them. So if I can get everybody to sit in the same room together, I am totally calling attention to that and just acknowledging and recognizing like how their pattern has been to not be in the same room with each other because they don't want to fight, because they don't want to argue, and how they're sitting in the room together. If it's quietly, if it's calmly, if they're not interacting, they're not fighting. And I'm going to say, it's really great to have you in the room together. You guys are not fighting, you're not arguing, and we're in a place where we're being quiet and we can actually hear each other talk. And I love that you're setting this up and with me being here, because this is a really great place for us to start. Right? So it's about building that connection.
Susan, time is flying, and
It is, yeah.
we don't have a lot of time left. I'm gonna, number one, you have to come back. And number two,
Oh, okay, really?
What
Okay.
are your, well, we're looking at, we try to wrap up by 1, but what do you want to leave us with? Like, I know we could talk about this. Now I understand why we could talk about this for days, because it's not a matter of a child not cooperating because they're a bad child. This is a matter of us trying to understand why the behaviors are happening and to connect with our children so that we can have trust and figure out, right, to understand them and have them be seen and be understood, to connect with resources to help whatever's going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the nuggets that I would leave you with the most, again, are going to be the dinner questions, not a behavioral contract, but like an agreement. And Holly, I'll send you the link for that as well. But an
Great.
agreement, like sometimes there's like agreements on the social media or like on like the devices, right? There's also an agreement on school attendance, right? So and having a third party sitting with the parents and sitting with the child to help mediate that is really helpful. And that can be something like when you have that agreement that's signed by both people. Number one, when you sign something, you're a little bit more committed to it. That's what social psychology tells us. And then the other part of it is that can be shared then with, I wouldn't share it with the child study team, but I would share it either with like your advocate in the school, like the teacher advocate, or I would share it with the guidance counselor, right? In terms of making sure that somebody at school knows that like, hey, we are working on this, and we have a plan, right? So we have the contract agreement for going to school. We have, these relationship questions, and then coming up with a plan. Like we anticipate, like, again, like the guardianship is like this really, really, really big issue that might take long or might not take long, right? But what is the kind of plan that we can come up with, like on a day-to-day? So talking about like, okay, like it's 9 o'clock, we need to start thinking about getting ready for bed. Even if you have like, if 7 o'clock, if you have like the younger kids, but even if you have a high schooler, 9 o'clock, because they're going to stay up till 11 or 12, even though if we don't want to, but parents are going to bed at 9 or 10 because they got to get up and go to work. So talking, before everybody's exhausted or depleted their energy for the day, talking it between 7 and 9 is going to be the key time to talk to your children about like, what time are you going to bed tonight? What time will you be turning off your device? Okay, so you say you're going to be turning off your device or like not on it. So when I go to check it tomorrow, I'm going to see that you didn't have any activity after a certain time. And they'll say, yes, mom, or no, mom, or whatever it's going to be. But it's important that the parent check it the next day so that when they did what they were supposed to do, we can say, I'm really proud of you for self-regulating. And I'm really proud of you for turning that off, even though I wasn't watching you. Right. So those are the kinds of things that when a connection has been broken, those are the kinds of things that start to build the connection back. So having a plan, what time are you going to bed? What time are you turning the phone off? Did you set an alarm for tomorrow morning? And a lot of parents will be like, you know what? I shouldn't have to tell my 15-year-old that anymore. Well, I agree with you. You shouldn't. But I'm 43 years old. And guess what? I should be able to wake up to my alarm, but I can't. So like, I mean, none of us are perfect. My kids are amazing. I love my children. I will have to tell them to brush their teeth every morning and every night for the next, 8 years. I've resigned myself to that fact, right? But when they do it without me asking, what do I say? Oh my gosh, look at those sparkly teeth. Thank you so much for remembering to do that on your own, and I hope it lasts for 2 or 3 days. Right. But I'm not going to shout about kids forgetting to brush their teeth. Like there are more important things. Like, did you do your homework that that are more important to me than like, do I have to remind them to brush their teeth? And that's a parenting like kind of suggestion thing. So, or like a parent preference. But the making a plan the night before, making the plan the morning of. So when I wake you up, you're going to get up to an alarm, or you want me to wake you up. And when I wake you up in the morning, I want to talk to you. Are you ready to talk? How much time do I have to give you before I can talk to you in the morning? Because as the adult, I'm going to talk to you. But if you want a choice of talking to you after 5 minutes after you woke up or 15 minutes, I'm going to be able to handle that, because there's no question about whether I'm not going to talk to you in the morning before you go to school, right? Like I mean, like as a parent, like if I want to talk to you, I'm going to talk to you, but I'm going to hear that maybe you're not ready to hear me first thing in the morning, or you're ready to hear me 10 minutes after you woke up. Same thing like an alarm or not an alarm and things like that. So the more that we can talk about and anticipate what do we fight about in the morning, and the more that we can plan for, or at least discuss ahead of time, the calmer it's going to be. And then, and then we're praising or recognizing, acknowledging with creative recognition, like how smoothly it went and how meaningful that was, and how you see that they want calm just like you want calm.
That would be a fun question, Susan, right? It's like, what would your ideal morning be like? I mean, obviously it has to include getting ready for school, but maybe they do want to sleep up until the last minute, or maybe they don't want to have you get them up. Maybe they want music.
Sure. Like brief solution focused therapy. That's what we call the magic question. If you could wake up tomorrow morning and you had one, and Harry Potter waved his wand, or bippity boppity boo, like what would your morning look like on a school day? It's wonderful, because it can't all happen, but I want to know what I'm working with as a therapist. And then the parents is also very eye-opening for the parents too.
That's excellent.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Holly.
Well, I don't know. I think we might have to, Susan, we just might have to like kidnap you for a full day session, because there's a lot of information, and I hope everybody
it was helpful.
I think it has been very helpful, but we may even be calling you. This is what I'm going to say to my participants on the call. Thank you for dropping the questions into the chat and for popping off mute and asking your questions. And please know that we are, number one, we're going to send a video of this conversation. We're going to send the dinner questions, the link to the contract agreement, and any other information that that Susan feels might be helpful to you guys, because this is obviously in her wheelhouse. She knows what things might be helpful for you to be aware of. But I'm also going to invite you, if there are other topics. I know somebody was talking about strategies for in the morning. I think you kind of answered that, Susan. But if there are topics that you would like, or questions that you would like answered, please drop me an email. Let us know, give me a call, because we are very blessed that we have so many providers that are willing to help us. And Susan is an excellent resource. This is my first time having Susan on our program. I've heard her speak in other meetings, and I can tell you that the wealth is deep. The knowledge is deep. But here's the thing, folks. We need to understand how to talk to our youth. And we also need to understand that even sometimes teachers don't understand this new way of thinking. Susan is talking about, nurtured heart is a wonderful thing. It's a new-ish thing. And not every teacher,
so new.
Not every teacher understands, for instance, the whole, what happened to you, not what's wrong with you. So ask if there are things that you as participants that you want to hear more about. Please drop me a line, because we work very hard, our team at Family Partners, to bring you topics that we think are helpful, because it's a team. This is a team effort, right? We're all trying to support youth and happy families. So Susan Gibbs, thank you 1,000 times for spending time with us today. And folks, look for follow-up information. Sharon, are you waving, or do you have a question? That's so funny. I see the little hand up. She might just be waving.
No, just clapping.
Oh, okay. I'm
so
sorry.
sweet.
I misread. Thank you so much, Sharon. Glad to have you with us. And Susan, thank you 1,000 times. I'm seeing lots of, she put her email in the chat, which I will also share with you folks, but lots of excellent presentation. People very appreciative of your time that you spent with us today, Susan.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I would love to be back. Because I'm sure that
you
there were
heard
other
it.
questions.
I've got it on tape, folks. I have it on tape. Thanks very much. Everybody stay healthy and be positive. And we just have to work on understanding one another, right? And understanding the schools have it hard too. I know, Susan, the schools, truancy and kids missing school, are they being a little bit more flexible, do you think, because we're coming back from a pandemic? I don't envy their role.
I don't know, from the feedback that I'm getting from the families that I'm currently working with, not really. Right. Like, I think they're trying to nip it in the bud. Yeah. I think they're trying to nip it in the bud early and hold up that governor's mandate that everybody has to be in the school. They're not. From what I'm hearing from the families,
Okay,
no, they're
but
not.
what I'm gonna say though to us all is to remember that the school's trying to do a job too. This is hard. I pray we all have our kids as our main objective, but let's be understanding that this isn't easy. Nothing about this is easy. Parents returning back to work, parents working from home, kids adjusting to in-person education. So I just say, keep learning, right, Susan? Keep trying to do what we can to understand these kids. They're complicated creatures, but they're worth it, right? So everybody stay healthy and come see us again. Okay. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.